William Arthur Philip Louis Windsor sat quietly in the back seat of the black car as it moved slowly through the crowded streets of London. Outside the windows, thousands of people lined the roads holding flowers and crying. The 11-year-old boy wore a dark suit that felt too big for his small frame. His younger brother Harry sat beside him looking equally lost and confused. Today was the day they would say goodbye to their mother forever. Princess Diana had died just a few days earlier in a car crash in Paris. The whole world seemed to be mourning with them. William had always known his mother was special, but he never understood just how much she meant to people until now. As the car moved closer to Westminster Abbey where the funeral would take place, William could see people of all ages wiping tears from their eyes. His mother had always told him that being a prince meant more than living in palaces and attending fancy parties. She taught him that real royalty came from caring about people who needed help. Diana would take William and Harry to homeless shelters where she would sit and talk with people who had nowhere to live. She never acted like she was better than anyone else. She would hold babies, listen to sad stories, and always remember people's names when she met them again. William remembered one particular visit to a hospital where his mother spent hours with children who were very sick. She did not just shake hands and leave like other important visitors. Instead, she sat on their beds, played games with them, and made them laugh even though they were in pain. One little girl named Sarah had been in the hospital for months. Diana visited her every week, bringing books and toys. When Sarah finally got better and went home, she wrote Diana a letter saying that the princess had made her feel like the most important person in the world. That was his mother's gift. She could make anyone feel special and loved. Rich or poor, young or old, sick or healthy, Diana treated everyone with the same kindness and respect. She taught William that this was what it truly meant to serve others. Now, as the funeral procession continued through London, William saw something amazing. People from every walk of life had come to honor his mother. There were wealthy business people in expensive suits standing next to factory workers in their everyday clothes. There were grandmothers holding children, teenagers with flowers, and entire families who had traveled from far away just to be there. All of them were united in their love for Diana and what she represented. The young prince realized that his mother had touched lives in ways he was only beginning to understand. She had shown the world that royalty could be about compassion instead of just ceremony. She proved that a princess could roll up her sleeves and work alongside charity volunteers. She demonstrated that being born into privilege meant you had a responsibility to use that privilege to help others. As they reached the abbey, William made a silent promise to himself. He would carry on his mother's work. He would use his position to help people who needed it most. He would remember that being royal meant being a servant to the people, not their master. He would show the same kindness to everyone he met regardless of their background or status. The funeral service was long and filled with beautiful music and heartfelt speeches. When it was over, William walked behind his mother's coffin with millions of people watching on television around the world. Each step he took felt like he was walking toward his future, toward the man he wanted to become. That day, 11-year-old William Windsor did not know that years later he would meet a young woman named Catherine Middleton, who would help him turn his childhood promise into reality. He did not know that together they would inspire millions of people to believe in the power of empathy and kindness. All he knew was that his mother's legacy of love and service would live on through him. Years passed, and William grew into a young man who never forgot the promise he made at his mother's funeral. When he turned 18, he decided to attend the University of St Andrews in Scotland. He wanted to study art history and geography, but most importantly, he wanted to experience life as a normal student away from the constant attention of the royal world. St Andrews was a small coastal town with ancient stone buildings and narrow cobblestone streets. The university had been there for over 600 years and had a reputation for excellent education. William chose to live in St Salvator's Hall, a student residence where he hoped to make real friendships with people his own age. On his first day, William was nervous about meeting his fellow students. He wondered if they would treat him differently because of who he was. As he walked into the dining hall carrying his lunch tray, he looked around for a place to sit. Most tables were already full of students chatting and laughing together. Then he noticed a young woman sitting with a small group of friends near the window. She had long dark hair and was wearing a simple sweater and jeans. What caught William's attention was not her appearance, but the way she was listening to one of her friends who seemed upset about something. The young woman was nodding thoughtfully and offering tissues while speaking in a gentle voice. Her name was Catherine Middleton, though everyone called her Kate. She came from a middle-class family in Berkshire, where her parents ran a successful party supply business. Kate had worked hard to earn her place at Standrews and was studying art history just like William. When William finally worked up the courage to introduce himself, Kate smiled warmly and invited him to sit with her group. She did not act impressed or nervous around him like many other people did. Instead, she treated him like any other student trying to find his way in a new place. Over the following weeks, William and Kate began spending more time together. They would study in the library, walk along the beach, and attend lectures side by side. William discovered that Kate had a natural ability to make people feel comfortable and valued. She remembered details about people's lives and always asked thoughtful questions about their families and interests. Kate came from a family that believed in hard work and helping others. Her parents had taught her that success meant more than just making money. They volunteered in their community and always encouraged Kate and her siblings to think about how they could make a positive difference in the world. One evening, William and Kate were walking through the town when they came across an elderly man who had fallen on the sidewalk. While other students walked past without stopping, Kate immediately rushed to help. She knelt down beside the man, checked if he was injured, and helped him to his feet. She stayed with him until they were sure he was okay, and even offered to call someone to pick him up. William was impressed by Kate's instant response to help a stranger. This was exactly the kind of compassion his mother had shown throughout her life. He began to see that Kate possessed the same natural empathy that had made Diana so beloved by people around the world. As their friendship grew stronger, William realized that Kate understood the weight of responsibility that came with privilege. She never sought attention for her kind acts, but simply did what felt right. She listened more than she spoke, and always seemed to know the right thing to say to make someone feel better. Their relationship was built on shared values of service, kindness, and genuine care for others. Together, they began to envision how they might use their future positions to make a real difference in people's lives. After graduating from university in 2005, William and Kate faced their first real test as a couple. The world was watching their every move, and the pressure was intense. Photographers followed them everywhere they went. Newspapers wrote stories about what Kate wore, where they ate dinner, and whether they would get married soon. The constant attention began to affect their relationship in ways they had not expected. Kate found it difficult to live a normal life when cameras were always pointed at her. She could not go shopping with friends or visit her family without creating a media circus. William worried that the same pressures that had affected his mother's life were now hurting the person he loved most. After much discussion and many tears, they decided to take a break from dating to figure out if they could handle this kind of life together. The separation was painful for both of them, but it also became a time of important personal growth. Kate returned to work at her family's party planning business, but she also began volunteering with local charities in her spare time. She spent Wednesday evenings reading stories to children at a hospital near her home. The young patients looked forward to her visits and would save their best drawings to show her each week. One little boy named Tommy had been in the hospital for months with a serious illness. He was only 6 years old but had already been through multiple surgeries and treatments. Tommy's parents worked long hours and could not visit him every day, so he often felt lonely and scared. Kate began spending extra time with Tommy, playing board games and helping him with homework that his teachers sent to the hospital. When Tommy finally got better and was able to go home, he gave Kate a picture he had drawn of the two of them reading together. At the bottom, he had written, "Thank you for being my friend when I was scared." Kate kept that drawing in her purse and looked at it whenever she felt unsure about her future path. Meanwhile, William was focusing on his military training, but he also spent more time working with charities that had been important to his mother. He visited homeless shelters in London and spoke with people about their experiences living on the streets. He learned that many homeless individuals had mental health challenges that made it difficult for them to find and keep jobs or housing. One evening, William met a man named David who had been homeless for 2 years. David had served in the military but struggled with depression and anxiety after returning from deployment overseas. He had lost his job, then his apartment, and eventually found himself sleeping in doorways and parks. David told William that the hardest part was not the cold or the hunger, but the way most people looked right through him as if he did not exist. William spent several hours talking with David about his military service, his family, and his hopes for getting back on his feet. He learned that David was intelligent and skilled but needed help dealing with his mental health issues before he could rebuild his life. This conversation inspired William to learn more about the connections between military service, mental health, and homelessness. During their time apart, both William and Kate discovered that they missed not just each other, but the shared sense of purpose they had developed together. They had found their individual passions for helping others, but they realized they were more effective as a team than as separate individuals. Kate's work with children had taught her about the importance of early childhood experiences in shaping a person's entire life. William's conversations with homeless veterans had shown him how mental health challenges could affect anyone, regardless of their background or previous success. When they finally got back together, they found that their separate experiences had actually strengthened their partnership and given them clearer direction for their future work together. Their reunion was not just about romantic love, but about shared commitment to using their positions to make a real difference in people's lives. On April 29, 2011, the whole world watched as William and Kate exchanged vows at Westminster Abbey. 2 billion people tuned in to see the fairy tale wedding. But for William and Kate, this day represented something much deeper than a royal ceremony. It marked the beginning of their life together as partners in service to others. The wedding itself reflected their values of inclusivity and compassion. Instead of inviting only wealthy and powerful guests, they made sure to include people who had made differences in their communities. There were charity workers, teachers, and volunteers sitting alongside heads of state and members of royal families from around the world. Kate looked radiant in her elegant white dress, but what many people noticed most was the genuine joy and peace on her face. She was not just marrying a prince, but joining a mission to make the world a better place. William stood beside her with the same quiet determination he had carried since his mother's funeral, knowing that he now had a true partner to help fulfill this promise. After the ceremony, the new Duke and Duchess of Cambridge began their married life with a clear sense of purpose. They decided to focus their charitable work on 3 main areas that were close to their hearts: mental health awareness, early childhood development, and support for military families became their primary causes. Their first major project together was visiting military bases around the country to meet with soldiers and their families. William's own military service had taught him about the unique challenges faced by people in the armed forces. Kate brought her natural ability to connect with spouses and children, who often struggled with long deployments and frequent moves. At one base, they met Sarah, a young mother whose husband had been deployed overseas for 8 months. She was trying to raise 2 small children on her own, while dealing with her own anxiety about her husband's safety. Kate sat with Sarah for over an hour, listening to her concerns and sharing practical advice about managing stress and staying connected with deployed spouses. William spent time with Sarah's children, playing games and talking with them about missing their father. He helped them understand that their feelings were normal and that their father was proud of how brave they were being. By the end of the visit, the children were laughing and felt more hopeful about their father's return. This kind of personal attention became their trademark approach to charity work. They did not just make appearances, but invested real time and emotional energy in understanding people's struggles and offering genuine support. Their work with mental health organizations was particularly groundbreaking. At a time when many people still felt ashamed to talk about depression, anxiety, or other mental health challenges, William and Kate began speaking openly about these issues. William shared his own experiences with grief counseling after his mother's death, helping to reduce the stigma around seeking professional help. Kate focused on the connection between early childhood experiences and mental health later in life. She visited nurseries, schools, and family centers to learn about programs that helped young children develop emotional resilience and healthy relationships. One of their most memorable visits was to a center that worked with families experiencing domestic violence. Kate spent time with mothers and children who had fled dangerous situations and were trying to rebuild their lives. She listened to their stories with tears in her eyes, but also with strength and determination to help find solutions. The mothers at the center later said that Kate's visit made them feel less alone and more hopeful about their futures. One woman named Maria wrote to Kate afterward, saying that having someone of her status truly listen and care had given her the courage to continue fighting for a better life for her children. William and Kate's approach to royal duties was creating a new model for how public figures could use their influence. They showed that true leadership meant rolling up your sleeves and getting personally involved in solving problems rather than just talking about them from a distance. Their genuine care for others was inspiring people around the world to think differently about service and empathy. When Prince George was born in 2013, followed by Princess Charlotte in 2015 and Prince Louis in 2018, William and Kate faced a new and important challenge. How could they raise children who understood both their privilege and their responsibility to help others? They were determined to teach their children that being royal meant serving people, not being served by them. From the very beginning, William and Kate made sure their children were exposed to different kinds of people and situations. Instead of keeping them isolated in palaces, they took George, Charlotte, and Louis on visits to charity organizations and community events. The children learned early that their parents' work was about helping people who needed support. When George was just 4 years old, he joined his parents on a visit to a homeless shelter. Kate explained to him in simple words that some people did not have homes to live in and needed help finding safe places to sleep. George watched as his mother sat with people, listened to their stories, and helped serve meals. He saw his father playing cards with men who had been living on the streets for months. At first, George was shy and stayed close to his parents. But gradually, he began talking with some of the younger residents and even shared his toys with children at the shelter. When it was time to leave, George asked his mother why those people could not come home with them. Kate used this question as an opportunity to explain that helping others was not just about giving them things, but about working to change the systems that created problems in the first place. Princess Charlotte showed her own natural empathy from a very young age. During a visit to a children's hospital, 3-year-old Charlotte noticed a little girl who was crying because she missed her mother. Without being told what to do, Charlotte went over and offered the girl one of her own stuffed animals. She sat beside the hospital bed and told the girl stories until she stopped crying and started smiling. Kate and William were amazed by their daughter's instinctive kindness. They realized that empathy was not something that had to be forced or taught through lectures. Instead, it grew naturally when children were exposed to other people's experiences and encouraged to think about how they could help. The family developed traditions around giving back to their community. Every Christmas, instead of just receiving presents, the children helped pack gift boxes for families who could not afford to buy presents for their own children. They learned the names and ages of the children who would receive the gifts and tried to choose items that each child would especially enjoy. During the holiday season, George, Charlotte, and Louis would accompany their parents to visit elderly people in care homes who did not have family members to spend time with them. The children would perform little songs, show drawings they had made, and simply sit and chat with the residents. Many of the elderly people later said that these visits were the highlight of their entire year. William and Kate were careful to explain to their children that their acts of kindness should not be done for praise or attention. They taught them that helping others was simply the right thing to do, whether anyone was watching or not. The children learned to find joy in making other people happy rather than in receiving thanks or recognition. At home, the family had regular conversations about fairness, kindness, and responsibility. When the children had disagreements with each other, William and Kate helped them think about how their actions affected other people's feelings. They encouraged the children to apologize when they hurt someone and to think about how they could do better next time. The children also learned about different cultures and communities through their parents' work. They met families from many different countries and backgrounds, learning that people might look different or speak different languages, but still had the same basic needs for love, safety, and respect. As George, Charlotte, and Louis grew older, they began asking thoughtful questions about the problems they saw in the world. Why were some children hungry while others had too much food? Why did some families have to leave their home countries to find safety elsewhere? William and Kate answered these questions honestly but in age-appropriate ways, helping their children understand complex issues without overwhelming them. The royal children were learning that their future roles would involve much more than wearing crowns and living in palaces. They were discovering that true nobility came from using whatever advantages they had to make life better for other people. When the COVID-19 pandemic began spreading around the world in early 2020, William and Kate faced an unprecedented challenge. How could they continue their work of helping others when everyone was required to stay home and maintain social distance? The answer came from their deep understanding that empathy could transcend physical barriers and reach people in new and creative ways. As the first lockdown began in the United Kingdom, William and Kate immediately started thinking about who would be most affected by the isolation and fear that the pandemic was creating. Elderly people in care homes were cut off from their families. Healthcare workers were risking their lives every day to save others. Children were missing school and friends. Families were struggling with job losses and financial stress. The Duke and Duchess decided to use technology to maintain human connections during this difficult time. They began making video calls to people who were isolated and struggling. Their first call was to an elderly woman named Margaret, who lived alone in a care home. Margaret had not seen her family in weeks and was feeling lonely and scared about the virus. During their conversation, Kate asked Margaret about her life, her family, and her hobbies. Margaret's face lit up as she told them about her love of gardening and her memories of growing vegetables during World War II. William asked for her advice about growing tomatoes in his own garden. By the end of the call, Margaret was laughing and said she felt like she had been visited by old friends. Word spread quickly about these personal video calls, and soon William and Kate were connecting with people all across the country. They called healthcare workers during their breaks, thanking them for their service and asking about their families. They spoke with teachers who were working hard to educate children from a distance. They reached out to small business owners who were worried about surviving the economic impact of the pandemic. Each conversation was different, but William and Kate brought the same genuine interest and care to every person they spoke with. They remembered details from previous calls and followed up on personal situations. A nurse named James told them he was worried about his young daughter, who was having nightmares about the virus. 2 weeks later, when they called James again, Kate asked specifically how his daughter was doing and whether the family therapy sessions they had discussed were helping. The couple also found creative ways to support their charitable causes during the pandemic. Kate began baking cakes and treats at home, then delivering them personally to food banks and homeless shelters. She wore a mask and maintained safe distances, but her presence and the homemade food brought comfort to both volunteers and people receiving help. William started a project to deliver essential supplies to healthcare workers and vulnerable families. He would load his car with groceries, cleaning supplies, and personal protective equipment, then make deliveries throughout London. At each stop, he would spend a few minutes talking with people about how they were coping with the challenges of the pandemic. One of their most touching initiatives involved their children. George, Charlotte, and Louis joined their parents on video calls with healthcare workers, singing songs and showing artwork they had created to thank the medical heroes. These calls brought tears of joy to doctors and nurses who were working long hours under extremely stressful conditions. The family also participated in the weekly tradition of clapping for healthcare workers. Every Thursday evening, they would stand outside their home and applaud for the people who were risking their lives to care for others. The children made colorful signs with messages of thanks and drew pictures of rainbows that became symbols of hope during the pandemic. William and Kate's response to the pandemic showed the world that leadership during crisis required both practical action and emotional support. They demonstrated that even when people could not be physically together, empathy and human connection could still flourish through intentional effort and creative thinking. Their work during this time reached millions of people who were struggling with isolation, fear, and uncertainty. Many people later said that seeing William and Kate's genuine care and concern helped them feel less alone and more hopeful about getting through the difficult period. The pandemic response became a powerful example of how empathy could be scaled up to reach people on a global level while still maintaining the personal touch that made each individual feel valued and heard. As William and Kate's reputation for genuine empathy and effective action grew, they began to understand that their influence could reach far beyond the borders of the United Kingdom. They started thinking about how to address global challenges while maintaining the personal approach that had made their work so meaningful to individuals and communities. Their first major international initiative was the Earthshot Prize, launched in 2020. This ambitious project aimed to find and support innovative solutions to environmental problems around the world. But unlike many environmental programs that focused only on scientific research, William and Kate made sure the Earthshot Prize also addressed the human impact of climate change. They traveled to communities that were directly affected by rising sea levels, extreme weather, and environmental destruction. In the Maldives, they met families whose homes were disappearing under rising ocean waters. The children they spoke with talked about their fears of having to leave the only home they had ever known. Kate knelt down to their eye level and listened as they described their dreams for the future and their worries about where they would live as adults. In Africa, William and Kate visited villages where droughts had made it impossible for families to grow enough food to survive. They sat with mothers who walked miles every day to find clean water for their children. They learned about innovative programs that were teaching communities how to adapt to changing weather patterns while protecting the environment. What made their approach different was their focus on the people behind the environmental statistics. Instead of just talking about carbon emissions and temperature changes, they highlighted the human stories of families whose lives were being transformed by climate change. They made sure that the solutions they supported would directly benefit the communities most affected by environmental problems. The Earthshot Prize began attracting innovative thinkers from around the world. A young woman from Kenya developed a way to turn plastic waste into building materials for schools. A team from India created a system to provide clean energy to rural villages. A group from Brazil found a method to restore damaged rainforest while providing jobs for local communities. William and Kate personally met with each of the prize winners, learning about their backgrounds and motivations. They discovered that many of the most effective environmental solutions came from people who had grown up in communities affected by environmental problems and were determined to find ways to help their neighbors and families. Kate's work in early childhood development also expanded internationally. She began collaborating with organizations in different countries to understand how cultural differences affected child development and family support systems. In Bhutan, she learned about traditional practices that helped children develop emotional resilience. In Canada, she studied programs that supported Indigenous families in maintaining their cultural traditions while accessing modern healthcare and education. These international experiences taught Kate that effective programs needed to respect local customs and values while addressing universal human needs. She began advocating for early childhood support that was adapted to different cultural contexts rather than imposing one universal approach. William's mental health advocacy also took on global dimensions. He partnered with organizations around the world to address the stigma surrounding mental illness in different cultures. In some countries, talking about depression or anxiety was considered shameful for entire families. In others, mental health services simply did not exist or were not affordable for most people. Working with local leaders and mental health professionals, William helped develop culturally sensitive approaches to mental health education and support. He learned that in some communities, mental health was best addressed through spiritual practices, while in others, medical treatment was more acceptable. The key was listening to local voices and supporting solutions that made sense within each cultural context. One of their most impactful international projects involved working with young people who had been affected by conflict and violence. William and Kate traveled to refugee camps and communities recovering from war to meet with children and teenagers who had experienced trauma but were working to rebuild their lives. In Jordan, they met Syrian refugee children who had fled violence in their home country. Despite everything they had endured, many of these young people were determined to get an education and help other refugees. Kate was deeply moved by a teenage girl named Amira, who was teaching younger children in the refugee camp and dreamed of becoming a doctor so she could help other people who had been hurt by war. These international experiences reinforced William and Kate's belief that empathy was a universal language that could bridge cultural differences and bring people together around shared human values of compassion, hope, and mutual support. By 2023, the impact of William and Kate's empathetic approach to leadership was becoming visible in unexpected places around the world. Young people who had grown up watching their work were now becoming leaders themselves, and they were bringing the same values of compassion and service to their own communities and careers. Universities across the globe reported significant increases in students choosing to study social work, psychology, environmental science, and public health. Many of these students specifically mentioned William and Kate as inspiration for their career choices. They had seen how the royal couple combined privilege with purpose, and they wanted to find ways to use their own advantages to help others. Sarah Chen, a university student in Australia, started a mental health support group on her campus after watching William speak openly about his own experiences with grief and therapy. Sarah had struggled with anxiety during her teenage years and felt ashamed about needing help. When she saw a future king talking honestly about mental health, it gave her courage to share her own story and help other students who were facing similar challenges. The support group Sarah started grew from 5 students meeting in a small room to over 100 participants across multiple campuses. They organized workshops, peer counseling sessions, and awareness campaigns that reduced stigma around mental health issues. Sarah's work was recognized by mental health organizations, and she was invited to speak at conferences about student mental health initiatives. In Kenya, a young teacher named David Kipchoge was inspired by Kate's early childhood development work to create innovative education programs for children in rural communities. David had grown up in poverty and understood how early experiences could affect a child's entire future. He developed teaching methods that combined academic learning with emotional support and life skills training. David's program helped children who had experienced trauma, poverty, or family disruption to develop confidence and resilience alongside traditional academic skills. The success of his approach attracted attention from education ministers and international development organizations. David was invited to train teachers in other African countries and eventually established a network of schools using his methods. In the United States, twin sisters Maria and Sofia Rodriguez started a homeless outreach program in their city after being moved by William's work with people living on the streets. The sisters had grown up in a working-class family and understood how quickly circumstances could change for families facing economic hardship. Their program combined immediate help like food and clothing with longer-term support for job training, mental health services, and housing assistance. What made their approach unique was the emphasis on treating homeless individuals with dignity and respect, listening to their stories, and involving them in designing solutions to their own problems. The Rodriguez Sisters program became a model for other cities, and they were invited to speak at conferences about innovative approaches to homelessness. They always credited William and Kate with showing them that effective charity work required genuine relationships with the people being helped rather than just giving handouts from a distance. Social media platforms began trending with hashtags like empathy in action and kindness matters as young people shared stories of their own community service projects and acts of compassion. These were not organized campaigns, but organic movements of young people who had internalized the message that everyone had both the ability and responsibility to help others. A teenage climate activist named Ahmed Hassan in Morocco organized his community to clean up plastic pollution, while also addressing the economic needs of families who made their living from waste collection. He had learned from the Earthshot Prize examples that environmental solutions needed to consider human welfare alongside ecological protection. Schools around the world began incorporating empathy education into their regular curricula. Teachers reported that students were more interested in learning about social problems and more motivated to participate in community service projects. Children as young as elementary age were organizing fundraisers, writing letters to elderly residents in care homes, and volunteering at local charities. The ripple effects extended beyond individual acts of kindness to influence larger institutions and policies. Young professionals entering careers in business, government, and nonprofit organizations brought with them an expectation that their work should contribute to social good rather than just personal advancement. Companies began reporting that job applicants, especially those from younger generations, were asking about corporate social responsibility initiatives and employee volunteer opportunities during interviews. Many young workers were choosing employers based on their commitment to social and environmental causes rather than just salary and benefits. Political leaders around the world started noticing that young voters were demanding more empathetic and service-oriented approaches to governance. Candidates who could demonstrate genuine care for people's welfare and authentic connections to their communities were finding more success with younger demographics. The transformation was quiet but profound. A generation was growing up with the understanding that true success meant using whatever talents, resources, or opportunities they had to make life better for other people. Today, more than a decade after William and Kate began their journey as a married couple committed to empathetic leadership, their influence continues to grow and evolve in ways they never could have imagined during those early university days in Standrews. Their story has become more than just a royal romance or even a tale of charitable work. It has become a blueprint for how anyone can use their position, however small or large, to create meaningful change in the world. The three young princes and princess growing up in their household are living examples of the values their parents have championed. Prince George, now approaching his teenage years, has been spotted volunteering at local food banks without any media coverage, simply because helping others has become a natural part of his routine. Princess Charlotte has organized toy drives at her school and writes letters to children in hospitals around the world. Prince Louis, though still young, already shows the same instinctive kindness that characterized his parents and grandparents. The organizations that William and Kate have supported over the years have expanded their reach far beyond what anyone thought possible. Mental health services that once served only a few hundred people are now helping hundreds of thousands. Early childhood development programs have been implemented in dozens of countries, changing the lives of millions of children and families. Environmental initiatives have prevented countless tons of waste and pollution while creating jobs and opportunities for communities around the world. But perhaps the most significant impact of their work lies in the countless individual stories of transformation that may never make headlines. There is the former homeless veteran who now runs his own support program for other veterans struggling with housing and mental health. There is the single mother who attended one of Kate's early childhood workshops and went on to become a family counselor, helping other parents in crisis. There is the teenager who met William during a mental health awareness event and was inspired to become a therapist specializing in grief counseling. The ripple effects continue to spread through social media, schools, workplaces, and communities around the globe. Young leaders in every field are asking themselves the same question that guided William after his mother's funeral. How can I use whatever advantages I have to make life better for other people? Corporate executives are implementing employee volunteer programs and social responsibility initiatives that go far beyond traditional charity donations. Teachers are incorporating empathy and service learning into their lesson plans. Healthcare workers are focusing not just on treating diseases, but on addressing the social and emotional factors that contribute to illness. Government officials are consulting with affected communities before making policy decisions rather than imposing solutions from above. The model of leadership that William and Kate have demonstrated shows that true authority comes not from power over others, but from the willingness to serve others. They have proven that vulnerability can be a source of strength, that listening is often more powerful than speaking, and that small acts of genuine care can create changes that extend far beyond their immediate impact. Their approach has also shown that empathy is not just a nice sentiment, but a practical tool for solving complex problems. By understanding the human experiences behind statistics and policy issues, they have been able to develop more effective solutions that address root causes rather than just symptoms. As they continue their work and their children grow into their own roles as future leaders, William and Kate represent hope for a world that often seems divided by differences of politics, culture, and economics. They have demonstrated that compassion is a universal language that can bridge any divide, and that every person has both the capacity and the responsibility to contribute to the well-being of others. The promise that 11-year-old William made to himself at his mother's funeral has grown into something much larger than he could have envisioned. It has become a movement that spans generations and continents, inspiring millions of people to believe that they too can make a difference in the world. Their story reminds us that we all have the power to choose empathy over indifference, service over selfishness, and hope over despair. In a world that often celebrates individual achievement above all else, William and Kate have shown that the greatest achievements come from lifting others up rather than climbing higher ourselves. The legacy they are building will outlast any single project or initiative because it lives in the hearts and minds of the people they have touched and inspired. It continues to grow every time someone chooses kindness over cruelty, every time someone listens to a struggling neighbor, and every time someone uses their talents to help solve problems rather than just advance their own interests. This is how two people who fell in love at university have inspired generations through empathy, creating a legacy that will continue to change the world long after their own story ends.